Welcome everyone to another Dolphin Communication Project Dolphin Lesson. Today we are joined by Brooke of the Lowcountry Marine Mammal Network, and we are so grateful for your time. She's going to discuss marine mammal adaptations with us. And at the end of the talk, we will have time for some questions. And with that quick little intro, I'm going to pass it over to you, Brooke.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All righty. So good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. Like she just said, I am Brooke. I am a marine scientist with Lowcountry Marine Mammal Network. We are based here in Charleston, South Carolina, and our entire mission is to protect our local marine mammals for future generations. We do that through science, outreach, and a ton of conservation work. And so today we are going to talk about all the different characteristics that make mammals mammals. We're also going to talk about the types that we see here in the low country, and we're going to talk about ways that we protect them. Then we're going to dive into some of the really cool adaptations that our cetacean friends have, which are dolphins, our whales, and our porpoises. And then we will talk about how these adaptations help them be really well prepared for their environment. And then at the end, we'll have time for questions and answers. So let's dive in. All right, so we are mammals. So there are a ton of things that we share with our marine mammal friends, even though we are on land. And so we have these really unique characteristics that make us really well suited for our environment. So the first thing that all mammals have is hair or fur. And so let's look at some cute little furry faces. So we have our sea otter on our farthest left side, and they have the thickest fur out of any marine mammal, That fur helps keep them nice and warm and bundled in some of the coldest water in the Pacific. We also see animals like our walruses and our California sea lions that have these really nice pelts and some whiskers on their face. But even animals like our dolphins and whales also have hair. It just looks a little different. So for something like a dolphin, they actually have whiskers on their rostrum, which is another word for their nose. And they have these whiskers there for several weeks of their life, sometimes longer. And then they shed those hairs to make themselves extra streamlined, which we'll talk about more later. And then we have this animal on the right-hand side, which is our mighty humpback whale. And you can see that there's all of these big old bumps on their head. Each of those bumps is an enlarged pore, and each enlarged pore has a little whisker. So all marine mammals, they have hair or fur. Some are really thick, like our California sea lion, and some are really thin and maybe only last for a short minute, like our dolphins. The next thing that makes all mammals mammals is the fact that they are warm-blooded. So let's think for a second about our cute little turtle friends who spend hours sitting on a log in order to capture as much warmth as they can from the sun in order to have energy. Us mammals are not like that. We don't have to sit outside all day long, thankfully. Instead, we are able to regulate our own body temperature, and that is because our blood is warm. And so there are definitely other things that our marine mammals have to help them stay warm, like fur, as we just mentioned. We also see that animals will keep different parts of their body out of really cold water to help regulate their temperature even better. And so this little otter has its paws out of the water, and that is because they have extra blood vessels there. And so we also see extra blood vessels in the fluke, the fins of our cetacean friends. Again, those are our whales, our dolphins, and our porpoises. And so this image on the upper right-hand side shows kind of a cross section of a dorsal fin, which is that fin right behind the blowhole. And so in the dorsal fin and the fluke and the flippers, there are all these extra blood vessels. And so again, it helps keep them warm. I like to think of it like our hands and our head and our feet. And so something we as humans might do if we're really cold is we might put a hat on, maybe some gloves, definitely some socks. And the first thing we might shed when we're really warm is that hat, those gloves, and those socks. We might, switch over to sandals if it's too warm. And so those extra blood vessels definitely help them out as well. Another thing that many marine mammals have, not all, but many of them have this nice fatty layer that we call blubber. So it sits right below the skin, right above the muscle, and that's another thing that helps regulate their body. But ultimately, all mammals are warm-blooded, which is pretty awesome. The next thing all marine mammals do is they breathe with their lungs. They breathe air. And so when we think about an animal that spends the entirety of its life in the water, like a dolphin, they have their nostrils kind of fixed in a different place compared to an animal that might stay out on the surface quite a lot more, like a sea lion. They have their nostrils right in front of their face. So dolphins, who spend all their time in the water, they have their nostrils instead on the top of their head. We're going to talk more about this later on, but basically having those nostrils there instead of in front of their face allows them to be extra streamlined. So instead of having to put their entire face out of the water every time they need to take a breath, which would cause them to use significant more energy, it would also expose them to predation. They're able to just barely surface and grab that breath of air and continue on their way without stopping, without exposing themselves to anything. And so all mammals, we breathe with lungs, we're breathing air. The next thing that all mammals have, are vertebrae. And so those vertebrae stack together to create the backbone of us animals. And so for us, we can feel our spine and we can feel that there are all these little bumps. Each of those bumps is one of these vertebrae. So if we were to split the skeleton apart, these really vertical pieces, I think I might have one. Yeah, I do. A vertebrae right here. So it's missing those vertical pieces, but you can kind of see there's like this little drum and there's this hole. And this hole is a space for the spinal cord. And so then they all kind of slink together. And so these would stack together in the human's body, just like that. And in the dolphin's body, kind of like that. And so that helps give them this structure, but more importantly, it allows them to do locomotion. So it allows us as humans to walk around. It allows us to go find our friends, find our food, avoid the predators. And for a dolphin, it helps them swim. It helps them find their food, find their friends, and avoid their predators. And let's just imagine for a second, we didn't have these vertebrae. We didn't have this backbone keeping us upright. It would be very difficult to still be a successful mammal in our environment. Instead, we would be just blobs of jello. And so having these vertebrae are really, really crucial in order to move around in the big blue. All right, the next thing that makes all mammals mammals is the fact that mammals have live birth and they take care of their young. So let's think about our other types of turtles, our little reptile friends. They are laying eggs up on the beach. Which is pretty different from us, right? We did not come from an egg that was laid on a beach. Instead, our moms grew us in their womb. For humans, that is upwards of 9 months. And for dolphins, it's upwards of 12 months. And for certain whales, it can be almost 1.5 to 2 years. And so what's happening during this time is this really unique bond and connection is formed between the mom and their offspring. Now, this bond is crucial for survival because for the first 3 to 5 years after that baby is born, they're basically glued to their mom. They're learning how to communicate. They're learning how to socialize. They're learning how to hunt, how to be a dolphin. Very similar to a lot of us humans who learned a lot of, normal human traits from our moms. So this is pretty different from a lot of animals. Sea turtles, again, being from an egg, they don't have any protection. They don't have any direction when they're hatched. They just go to the sea and they have to figure it out themselves. So we're pretty lucky because we have that protection. And so this picture that we're looking at is of a mom and a calf. This is Koko and Kai, who are 2 individuals that live here in Charleston. And you can see on the back of little Kai, there are these different lines, and we call those fetal folds. And those fetal folds are from the animal being curled up in the womb. All right. The last thing that makes all marine mammals mammals is the fact that they have mammary glands and produce milk. So after that mom has carried their baby for 12 months, now they have birthed it, and now they have the ability to produce food for it. So that baby is not automatically hunting for fish. Instead, it is going to be getting all of its nutrients from its mom for those first several weeks, several months, often upwards of like 1 year plus. It just depends on the relationship between the mom and the calf. And so this is Koko, that dolphin that we just looked at. And you can see her underside is all swollen and pink because she was nursing at that time. And so if we look at this picture to the right-hand side, we have a picture of a female dolphin and a male dolphin. Male dolphins have these 3 lines kind of in a row. So they have their umbilicus, which is their belly button, their genital slit, and their anus. Females have all the same stuff, except they are also producing milk. They're also giving birth. So they have these mammary slits, which are on either side of the genital slit. And so those slits open wide enough for a baby calf's rostrum to get in there. And then the baby calf actually has this really specialized tongue. It kind of looks like a hairy tongue. And we call those papillae. And they are able to just attach onto the nipple so that the mom dolphin can continue to swim while the calf dolphin is just nursing right alongside, which is pretty cool. All right, so now that we know what makes a mammal, let's talk about the types of marine mammals on our planet. So there are a bunch of different groups. We'll start at the top, which is the muscelids. So those are going to be our sea otters. Ursidae has a group all to itself because it's the mighty polar bear. Then we have the pinniped group, which is our walruses, our sea lions, and our seals. We have the sirenians, which are our dugongs and manatees. And then the last group is our largest group by far, and they are called cetaceans. So that's that word I've used a couple times now, and that is the descriptor for whales, dolphins, and porpoises. This group is so big. There are 89 known species that we know of today. I'm sure there's more on our planet that we'll discover eventually. But there's so many species that we've actually broken them up into 2 categories. And so some of those animals are what we call odontocetes, and they are animals that have teeth. So that would include things like our sperm whale, our dolphins, our porpoises, our beluga whales, our orcas. All of those animals have teeth. But then we have all these other animals who don't have teeth, and instead they have baleen. And so these baleen plates hang down in the mouth of animals like our humpback whale, our blue whale, our gray whale, and they act like filters. So they're able to expand their lower throats because they have something called throat grooves. So if you look at this picture right here in the middle of the humpback whale, you can see all these lines. And so like an accordion, it's able to expand and grab all of this water. And then they push all of this water out through the baleen plates like a sieve, and they're filtering out some of the smallest things on our planet, like krill and other planktonic species. Just really cool. And then here in South Carolina, we're pretty lucky because we do get to see a lot of different marine mammals. And we're even more lucky because we have local dolphins living right here in our backyard. So in Charleston alone, we have anywhere from 300 to 350, sometimes 400, depending on the year. And these animals, they live here all of their life. So they're here all year round. And we can recognize them because we see them every day. They live in our backyard. So we can recognize them based off their dorsal fin, because just like our thumbprints are unique, their dorsal fins are unique. Some of them have different scars, different cuts, different coloration. That make them, visible from shore. So we don't even have to tag them or do anything like that. We also recognize them based off of where they hang out. So Charleston is made up of a lot of salt marshes. I wish I had a map for you guys, but there's all these salt marshes or river systems, and a lot of dolphins call one particular river system home. And so you'll find them hanging out in just this one area for most of their life. And then just like humans, they have really unique behaviors, which is pretty cool. And so having local animals in your backyard, wherever you are, you probably have some sort of local group, whether it's wolves or coyotes or dolphins or something else. Having these animals in our backyard is so, so cool, and why it's so much more important that we learn from them and we protect them. All right, so now that we have talked all about marine mammals, let's talk about some adaptations. So today we are specifically going to hone in adaptations about our cetacean friends. So again, whales, dolphins, porpoises. And what's crazy about these animals is they were once land dwellers 50 million years ago. And of course, a lot has changed since then. And we're going to just go through some of those different physical changes and those behavioral changes that have taken place. And we're going to highlight 6 important ones today. All right, so let's first define an adaptation. An adaptation is a change in an animal, and it can either be physical or behavioral. and they help it survive better in its environment. So wherever you're at, let's point to some sort of body part that we have and think through how it helps us survive. So a physical change that I have are my eyes, which I can use to see. And the ability to see can help me stay out of trouble, which is really good, or can help me find my food or help me find my partner. So all of those things are because I have this physical adaptation of my eye. A behavioral change could be me choosing to go to sleep earlier so that I feel more rested the next day. All right, so now that we know what an adaptation is, let's dive in. So the first one we're going to talk about is breathing. So we kind of started to touch on this at the very beginning, but the blowhole has shifted over time. And so this first picture on the left-hand side is of a Pachycetus, which was an animal that was alive on our planet 50 million years ago. You can see its nostrils are right in front of its face. And this animal spent most of its time on land. The second animal in the middle is a Rhodocetus, and you can see that its nostrils are a bit higher on the skull. This animal was around about 46 million years ago. And then this last one is our gray whale. This is a modern animal that we have on our planet today. And you can see that its nostrils are no longer at the front of its face, nor in the middle. Now they're right on top of its head, which we call a blowhole. And again, this is helping the animals become more efficient swimmers by having their nostrils on top. So the blowhole shift, or the migration of the nostrils, is something that is a really cool physical adaptation that's made these animals even more successful in their environment. The next adaptation is swimming. So these animals have had to become streamlined over time. So again, 50 million years ago, their ancestors were living on land primarily, going into the water more and more in order to get food, because food on land was becoming more and more limited. I'll show you a picture of them in a second. The other thing that helps these animals become streamlined is losing that hair. And so they can cut through the water as fast as possible at crazy speeds because they don't have any of this drag on them. So when I'm doing school groups here in Charleston, one thing I always have kids think about is if they put on a sweatshirt and sweatpants and socks and they jumped into a swimming pool and tried to swim as fast as they could, it's really hard. They have all of this drag, all of this weight on them. And of course, hair follicles don't weigh that much, but we see swimmers today, they shave their legs so that they don't have any drag whatsoever. So here's a picture of some of those animals we talked about, and we can see some physical changes happening. So this one on the bottom, that is that first animal we discussed, the one that has been around for 50 million years. The second one in the middle, that is the Rhodocetus, that's been 46 million years ago. And then on the top is a modern day dolphin. And so we can look at these pictures and we can see just how physically they have changed. We can see from picture 1 to picture 2 that the legs have started to shorten, the tail has started to lengthen. Now there's webbed feet. They've got a longer nose. And then eventually in today's dolphin, you can see that they no longer have feet at all. They don't need any webbed feeding. Instead, they have their own fluke, and they have their flippers and their dorsal fin and their rostrum, which can cut through the water really quickly. They also have additional vertebrae to hold all of this extra weight and support just this elongated body. And these flukes can help them push themselves much quicker through the water so they can get their food easier. All right, the next one is diving. This one is really interesting, but we're not going to spend too much time because it is complicated. But basically, our deepest diving whale is the Cuvier's beaked whale, and they can dive upwards of 9,800 feet, which is crazy. These animals live right here off our shore in Charleston, and we rarely see them because they're very elusive and they're spending all their time at these deep, deep depths. But another really deep diver is our mighty sperm whale at just about 7,000 feet. So a lot of things have to change in order to be able to dive to these deep depths. They have to be able to deal with all of this extra pressure. So as you're going down in the water column, there's more and more pressure being pushed on these bodies. And so their bodies have to basically take all of that and not just collapse under pressure. They also have to adapt their ability to hold their breath. So it takes them a long time to get to that depth, and it takes them a really long time to surface. And so a lot of these animals can hold their breath for hours, which is crazy. And so some of the things that have happened as far as dealing with the pressure is they have collapsible lungs and ribs, and they have less air pockets in their body compared to an animal like ourselves or an animal like our dolphins. And they're absorbing a really limited amount of nitrogen, so they're not getting nitrogen sickness as easily, which is pretty interesting. And then they're able to use their lungs and oxygen at a much more efficient rate, and basically go to a point of, very little heartbeat action, and still be able to survive. And so basically their muscles don't need a lot of oxygen, which means they're working anaerobically, which allows them to hold their breath for such long periods. All right, the next part is sleeping. So dolphins are considered conscious breathers, which means that they have to remember to take a breath. That's pretty different from us because we are unconscious breathers. We can go to sleep and we don't have to remind ourselves to take a breath when we're, in REM sleep. What's really interesting about this is observations of bottlenose dolphins in aquariums and zoos and of whales and dolphins in the wild show basically two different methods of sleeping. They are either quietly resting in the water, by either vertical or horizontal, which I'll show you pictures of in a moment, or they sleep while they're swimming slowly next to another animal. So let's watch that first. So I have this video of synchronized sleeping narrated by Natalie Portman. My favorites.
One of the amazing things about dolphins is even when they're asleep, they have to remember to keep going to the surface for air. So they sleep with only one half of their brain at a time. And they sleep with one eye open to keep a lookout for danger. It's synchronized sleeping.
The video is so calming. So this idea of synchronized sleeping is really, really cool, and is something that we see more often in animals that are living offshore or in reef systems. And Natalie Portman, she talked about how these animals sleep with one eye open and half of their brain. And so it's kind of a state similar to cat napping. So here you go. You can see them sleeping with one eye open. And so this ability to shut down half of their brain and the opposite eye is not unique to just marine mammals. A lot of other animals do this, like our sharks. And basically, while the other half of the brain stays awake at a low level of alertness, the other side is able to fully rest. The attentive side is used to watch for predators, obstacles, other animals, so they're alert enough so that they can wake themselves up if something bad is going to happen. And it also is what is signaling these animals to rise to the surface for a fresh breath of air. After approximately 2 hours, the animal will reverse this process and they'll rest the active side of the brain and awake the arrested half. For other animals, we find that it's pretty interesting because now they have two or maybe one calf that they have to learn or teach how to sleep and swim with them. And so what's cool about newborns is, I guess not cool, but one thing about newborns is they don't have enough blubber in order to stay afloat on their own. And so mom dolphins are able to create a slipstream, which is basically just like the right underside of her body that creates like a small little stream that the animal can then put themselves in and basically ride the wake while their mom is swimming. And so we call this echelon swimming. And basically the mom is just towing them along, which is pretty cool. And it allows them so that the mom doesn't have to think too much while she's taking a rest. Then in other areas, we don't necessarily see the synchronized swimming. We might just see something like this picture. which is a picture of an animal or a dolphin logging. And so logging is a form of sleep where they're just sitting at the surface for an extended period of time. It's not always 2 hours. That can be kind of long for these dolphins who are just doing the logging position. Oftentimes it's like 15 to 30 minutes at a time. And so we call it logging because these dolphins are resembling a log floating at the surface. And then we have these animals, the sperm whales, who are motionless when they sleep and they're sitting or swimming vertically. This is the only animal that we know of on our planet that sleeps like this. It is really interesting. But we also know that sperm whales only spend about 7% of their day resting or sleeping, which means they are one of the least sleep dependent animals that we know of. And so there's all these really interesting sleep patterns for marine mammals. All right, now let's talk about eating. Eating is probably the coolest behavioral adaptation I've seen. There's so many different kinds. This is just like a very short list of some of the ones that I could come up with off the top of my head. But a lot of these techniques are specific to the species, and some of them are really specific to the region. So many of these are learned behaviors rather than like instinctual behaviors, showing evidence of these being developed over time. So this picture in the bottom left corner is of some of our dolphins doing something called strand feeding. I'll show you a video of that in a second, but basically these animals are working together in groups of 2, upwards of 5, and they're trying to corral fish in the center of like an inlet. And then once they've corralled those fish, one of them will make a signal, either a whistle or some squeaks, maybe a tail slap, and one of them will use their fluke to rush those fish up onto the beach. Then these dolphins temporarily beach themselves, which is bonkers. We've also seen animals utilize something like the side of a ship in order to corral their fish up against, and that we call shipside feeding. This is something, again, that we see here in Charleston with all of our big freight ships moving through. Then this picture on the bottom right corner is of some dolphins doing what we call mud ring feeding. Ooh, words. And this is basically them stirring up a bunch of mud, which confuses the fish, and they basically get entrapped in there. And then the dolphins are able to take their time and go in and swim for those fish. This top picture is of some bubble net feeding happening by some of our humpback whales. And so what happens is one whale will swim around and create like a bubble net by blowing bubbles up to the surface that traps in a bunch of different types of critters, and then they will all lunge up together, mouth wide open, to get that fish. So let's watch a video of strand feeding. So you can see all of those fish were rushed up onto the beach, and then they all kind of took their turns getting the fish. Now, this is a risky feeding behavior because they're exposing their bodies. I mean, a lot of times they're coming like 85, sometimes 90, maybe the whole dolphin comes out of the water onto the beach. So we'll talk about human impact maybe later on, but this is definitely very scary for these dolphins to do. It's a lot of energy. They might get a mouthful of mud. Almost certainly they'll get a mouthful of mud. And sometimes birds will swoop in and grab their fish from them. And so some of these feeding behaviors have happened over time because this has made sense. But if we as humans are interacting with them too much, then we could be the cause of destroying this really interesting adaptation. But this is definitely one of the coolest feeding behaviors we get to see here in the Lowcountry because we see it so often. And this is another example of a learned behavior. So this is something that only is learned from the mom. So if the mom did not teach their calf how to strand feed, they're never going to learn. It's not something you learn from a peer. And we'll see that strand feeders tend to hang out with each other, and non-strand feeders kind of hang out with each other. And so these really unique relationships happen based off of what type of feeding style you prefer to do. And this you would only ever see in certain areas that experience like really big tidal fluctuations. So we have seen it in other parts of the world, like in different mangrove systems or different salt marsh systems, but we're pretty lucky because we get to see it a lot. This is another quick video. This is called fish whacking or kerplunking. So they just whack a fish right out of the water, and that stuns them temporarily. So that one's definitely one that one singular dolphin can do by themselves. So of course there is some human impact of, outside of humans interacting with these animals while they're trying to feed, and a lot of other things that humans do, like illegally feeding them. We also see that our trash is ending up in their bellies, definitely unintentionally, right? And so we have this theory called bioaccumulation. And so the idea behind this is one piece of plastic can impact multiple animals, including us. And so if we start at the beginning of this diagram, we have a picture of some zooplankton, or just plankton, coming up to the surface at night, which they do every night through what we call diurnal vertical migration. And they're eating up a bunch of food. Now they're not picking out plastic, of course, and there's usually not just floating forks that a piece of plankton can eat, but they're really, really small pieces of those plastics. And if you want to learn more about that, I did do a video about human impact a couple weeks back that I highly recommend checking out. So after that zooplankton or plankton has ate up all of this plastic, now the next biggest thing eats it, right? The fish. So now it's impacted not one, but two bellies. And then we have this really big fish followed it, and it's now eaten that fish. And so now it's gone through 1, 2, 3 bellies. And then at the end of this chain is us. So now it's gone through 4 bellies. And once we have, pooped it out, it just goes right back into the system. And this is really scary because we are impacting these animals' feeding behaviors in a way that can be very detrimental. All right, so the next one we are going to talk about is communication. So our dolphin friends and our friends who have teeth, our odontocetes, they tend to communicate through what we call echolocation. And so they're using sonar frequencies, and echolocation basically allows the dolphins to see by interpreting the echoes of sound waves that bounce off of objects near them in the water. So to echolocate objects nearby, dolphins produce high frequency clicks or squeaks or eeks. And then the sound waves travel through their melon, which is this fatty membrane kind of in front of their blowhole before their nose. And they are sending it into the water. The sound waves then bounce off of that object of interest. So in this picture, it's a fish, and are received by the dolphin's lower jaw as an echo, which is crazy. This information is then passed to the brain via the inner ear. And so it sounds kind of crazy to think through, but when we think about it, we speak with our mouth and use our vocal cords. Dolphins don't have vocal cords, so they have to produce different noises. And then we hear with our ears, right? So it makes sense to us as humans, but when we really break it down, it definitely sounds way more complicated. So the unfortunate side of this is sound waves are getting crossed. So let's watch this quick video about shipping traffic. And as it gets busier up top, the noise down below becomes deafening, making it really difficult to use echolocation efficiently.
Cetaceans have lived in our oceans for millions of years. The smallest one, the Hector's dolphin, is about 20 times smaller than the blue whale, the largest living organism on Earth. Its heart is so big that a person could almost stand in it. Cetaceans find their way even in darkest ocean depths. They emit calls and detect obstacles and prey from the reflected echoes. Cetaceans often communicate with each other. They stay in touch by calling to each other when spread out and likely exchange information on the occurrence of prey or predators. Some species can only reproduce because they can communicate over hundreds of kilometers and thus find each other. But underwater noise is increasingly masking the acoustic world of cetaceans. Noise levels in the oceans have doubled every decade for the past 60 years in some areas due to various human activities. Without countermeasures, underwater noise will further increase. Over 90% of world trade is transported by ship. Ship propellers generate intense noise. Cetaceans are exposed to ever-present noise in major shipping routes. Once a ship has passed, another will follow shortly. Chronic noise causes stress, which in turn affects the health of cetaceans and may also reduce their breeding success.
So noise means stress, and the stress then, of course, impairs the animal's immune system, just like how it affects us, which makes them even more susceptible to illnesses in general. But ocean noise pollution also causes marine animals to flee and abandon valuable habitats, either because of direct impact or because they have to follow their fleeing prey. We have seen here in the Lowcountry, a lot of animals are washing up with shattered eardrums because of all of this noise in our ocean, which is pretty scary to think about. So we've talked about how a lot of these amazing adaptations that marine mammals have, they can definitely be negatively impacted by our way of life as humans. But that's okay, because we're going to talk about how we can help. So there's lots of things that we can do to help protect our local marine mammals wherever you are at. But first, let's talk about if you're like actually on the water close to them. We want you to make sure that you are watching from a safe distance. So avoid feeding, touching, following. All of those things are illegal actions. If you are in a boat and you see a marine mammal cross by, that is a good time to just turn your boat into neutral. Make it so that it's not so deafening around them and there's not this threat of them getting chopped up by your propeller, and just enjoy the show. Enjoy seeing some dolphins close up, or manatees or whales, whatever it might be. If you're in an area that has a citizen science project like us, you can log any of those sightings, which helps us better understand the population and helps us better protect them. So here in Charleston or South Carolina in general, we have this really cool app called Dolphin Count that's free to download. A lot of other entities and states have something similar to that as well. And then just be a good citizen, stay vigilant, slow down, make sure that you're following boating rules. And some other things that you can do just right at home is you can support conservation actions. So you can do that through voting at polls. You can support different comments going on Facebook. You can choose to purchase things a different way. So, you know, if we're purchasing more sustainable products, then that tells that local group that we want to see more of that on our shelf and less of the single-use items. There's things that we can do to keep our home green, like turning off the lights, turning off the water if you're not using it, like while you're brushing your teeth. You can reduce, reuse, recycle. Definitely check into what your local community is doing. If they take only cardboard, then recycle that cardboard. If they don't take any plastic, then just make sure that you're using less and less if you can. There are a lot of really cool sustainable products out there, like reusable water bottles, reusable straws, reusable bags if you're going to the grocery store. The list goes on. Really, humans are very inventive. We found something cute for everything. And then you can pick up trash. So even if you are landlocked in the middle of the United States, you can still pick up trash because all of those river systems are connected to the ocean. And so your piece of trash will still impact some sort of animal, whether or not it's a marine mammal. So definitely pick up trash if it's safe to do so, if your parents say it's okay. And then I think at the end of the day, the best thing we can do is we can educate our friends and our family about how amazing these animals are and some of these ways that we can protect them, because it's not just going to change if one person makes, decisions. We all have to work together. All right, friends, that is all I have for you today. So I am going to open it up to questions. And I'll stop sharing my screen.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I will just do a quick little wrap up before we get to some questions. A reminder to any new viewers, if you want to check out other recorded programs, you can do that on our website. Just check out the Knowledge Hub. You'll see the webinar option. And of course, they're also on YouTube. Our channel is cleverly called the Dolphin Communication Project. Some of the topics that Brooke touched on in this talk, we have other talks that go into that more in depth. So there's a dolphin lesson on photo ID. If kids are interested in learning more, we have a more advanced deep dive program on diving adaptations. So if this talk piqued your interest into certain things, definitely check it out, because we might have a talk that goes into it in more detail. This was a dolphin lesson, so we hope it was accessible to kiddos out there, but also fun for adults too. Our deep dives tend to be more advanced topics. And then if you've blown through all of our webinars and you still want more, check out the Dolphin Pod. That's our podcast. Get it? Ha, ha, ha. And we are going to be having some new Dolphin Pod content later this year. So stay tuned. And we hope that you will support our friends at Lowcountry Marine Mammal Network. We're so grateful to you, Brooke, for your time in this talk and the last talk you did. And we hope that DCP viewers will go check out your content as well, and then support us if you can. We're thrilled to offer these webinars for free. We want everyone to have access to this information. We really buy into the philosophy that you can't protect what you don't understand. And so we think that the more people learn about dolphins, they'll be inspired to protect them. And then they have to protect the whole ocean. So you can do that by following organizations like ours, become a member, buy a t-shirt, spread the word, choose an organization on Amazon Smile, even if it's not DCP, let Amazon donate. And then stay in touch. So check out our websites for lots of content, stay in touch, share things on social media, and hopefully we'll keep Team Dolphin growing and getting stronger than ever. So Brooke, if you have a couple of minutes, we'll try and hit up a couple of questions. I'm just going to pull the chat window back up. The strand feeding that you talked about, is that what Mama Koko was doing in the slide about her, where you highlighted the mammary slits, or was she in trouble on the beach?
Yes, absolutely. So Koko is a really unique animal because she is one of the, I want to say there's 2 animals in the Kiowa River that strand feed by themselves, which is crazy because the rule of thumb we've always said is it's a team thing. You know, we see on average 3 animals strand feeding together. That seems to be the most successful. But Koko, she just does it by herself, which is crazy. So yes, that is what she was doing.
Oh, good. Didn't want anyone to worry about her in that picture. And a reminder, right? Scientists, we always want to say animals do this thing and put them in a little box, but there's always a spectrum of a given behavior. That's really cool. We had an advanced question, but I think maybe you could connect it to the Streamlined slide that showed some of the dolphins' ancestors. Would you say that cetaceans are the most divergent group from the traditional quadrupedal mammals? We can bring that down to a kid-friendly answer.
You know, I'm not really 100% sure. I mean, I think that I look at marine mammals and how they've adapted over time a lot more than other animals have. I don't know if they are the most, or if it's just
or if that's
time.
subjective too. Kind of like when we talk about intelligence, we're kind of trying to get away from having just a line of the most and the least, right? Because it's a kind of each species is as intelligent as it needs to be in its given environment. So I'm not sure, but it did remind me of the hippos, and the hippo being the common ancestor of the dolphins, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I actually feel like the hippo looks very similar to that first animal that we look at, the Pachyscetus. Every time I do a school group, they're like, "There's a hippo."
I was right there until you started talking.
Exactly. Yeah. So it is really interesting because, I mean, when we're looking at a hippo and how it's adapted from, that first ancestor, we're not seeing as much changes. So just like you said, we really only see these animals make these, really dramatic physical changes if there is that necessity for them to change. If that body is good for being in the water and out of the water, like what a hippo does currently, then there's no need for it to change. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's surviving as it is.
Exactly. Exactly. And then we see other
Awesome.
animals like the leatherback sea turtle, which has, barely changed since it was around, over 50 million years ago. And same with the horseshoe crab. I mean, that animal looks like a dinosaur and it hasn't changed because it doesn't need to. It's been successful all of these years. It hasn't had any big hurdles that it's had to overcome, and therefore no like major behavioral or physical changes have had to occur.
Cool. Why is your organization or the area called Lowcountry?
Ooh, good question. So Charleston is mostly at sea level, and in some places it's below sea level. And so it is lovingly called the Low Country because we flood so easily being right at sea level. Yep.
Oh, so lots already seeing impacts from rising sea levels?
Definitely. Yes, definitely. Humans are trying their best though to keep that land and they just keep putting money into building up the roads and all of that. But yeah, we see it flood very quickly, even with maybe a 20-minute rain here. So a lot of it is we just don't have the infrastructure to deal with rain at all, and so things just flood really easily. But yes, we're definitely seeing climate change.
Stay safe.
Yes.
I'm going to adjust this question a little bit. We got a question about whether or not a dreaming dolphin knows the difference between a dream and the reality. So like if it was dreaming about a shark, how would it know if it was a real shark or not? But to me, I think we even need to step back before that question and ask, do scientists even know if dolphins dream?
That is a really good question. I feel like I did read a paper like back when I was in college about them going into a deeper sleep. Like they don't go into a REM sleep necessarily because they always stay at, a relatively light sleep. But there were a couple cases in an aquarium setting where they show that this animal was in a deeper sleep. I don't know that they dreamt though. I think it was more just that they were dreaming deep, or not dreaming, they were sleeping deeper than a normal cat nap situation that we normally refer to. But yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if that research is
More
there.
to learn and more for us to go look into. Sometimes I like getting questions I don't know the answer to yet. It motivates me to go read up on it. We'll ask one more question. Humans are usually, average, born head first. How are dolphins born and how does that help them survive?
Oh gosh, these are a lot of tough questions. I hate, saying that I just don't know, but I really just don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, I can help with this one. So we're born head first, right? Because we're breathing air. But so the dolphins are born tail first so that the blowhole comes out last, which makes sense because you wouldn't want the baby dolphin dangling with its blowhole and not being able to breathe underwater yet. So that's always, to me, one of the fun kind of seemingly simplest adaptations to be an air-breathing animal living fully aquatic, to make sure that you're starting out really, really good at the beginning. Otherwise, they might not have made it this far.
See, there's so much to learn. So much to learn. That's amazing.
Yes.
That's so cool. Thanks for sharing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to our viewers today and to everyone who's watching this recording. We hope that you enjoyed it. Check out some more and check out our friends at Lowcountry Marine Mammal Network. And until next time. Bye.